Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Zenaton, and welcome to today's video for Legends of Runeterra. Probably gonna be a long one today. Today's video has been a video I've been meaning to do for quite a while now, ever since the latest set came out. Little late, honestly, mostly because I've been having some internet and computer related issues. So apologies for that, but well, the video's out here now. But yeah, today we are going to go through the latest set, A Curious Journey, and we're going to rate every single card in it on a scale of 0 to 5 stars. This rating is purely for constructed, specifically more towards the latter. And I feel like I should say that because there's some cards and some decks which are not that good on ladder, but are pretty good in tournaments. But yeah, as for the ratings, it's a pretty standard rating, 0 through 5 stars. No half stars. 0 stars is pretty much meme level garbage kind of cards. 1 star is pretty much an unplayable card, but it has a little bit of potential and maybe with some future support could see play. 2 and 3 is probably where a lot of the cards will go. 2 is a pretty niche card. Pretty much like a filler card that in the future probably can get replaced with something just better. 3 is pretty much just a middle of the pack card, plays a very specific role. It does its job. It's nothing too special. Maybe it's a tech card, but it plays a job and it does that job well. 4, uh, pretty much a 5-star card. Always comes short in some way. Maybe it's just really bad in the early game. Maybe it's an expensive card that's a really strong card in the late game, but it's really slow. And then 5 stars are pretty much those deck defining, meta defining cards. These are the things shaping decks. These are the things you look at and are like, wow, that card's busted. This is the card to nerf. Cards, for example, like that would be previously would be things like Wounded White Flame. But yeah, we are going to go through every single card. I believe there were 48 cards released in the set. We'll go through starting with Demacia, then we'll head to Frejord, then we will go to Bandel City going in alphabetical order. These are just my personal opinions. Nothing is backed by data, just my personal opinion on how I feel the strength of the card is and its rating. So I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. Go ahead. Feel free to argue with me. I would love to hear your comments down below. I very much encourage the conversation and would love to hear your opinions on the cards as well. Maybe there's a card I rate as 5 stars and you think it is awful, or maybe there's a card I rate with like 1 or 0 stars that I say is awful and you think it's a strong OP card or just strong in general. Anyway, enough rambling. Let's go and start rating some cards. So, like I said, let's start with Demacia. So, Demacia got quite a few cards. Their champion, I believe they got was Galio, and they also are sporting off a new keyword, Formidable. And our first card is actually showcasing part of the Formidable keyword. We have Duron Architect. 3 mana, 1/4, support. Give my supported ally +0/+2 and Formidable this round. Yes, there are strong combos with this guy. For example, Duron Architect and a Braum. That is a good combo. Don't get me wrong. Like, you're turning Braum into an 0/8 with Formidable, and the 1/4 stat line is nice. He's most likely going to survive swinging in thanks to his stat line. But I don't know. I think it's just. I just think it's. I don't think it's a full on meme. I just think it's a little too weak. I think the guy's power level and what you're trying to do is just not enough. Like, you need 2 cards. And you might say, like, well, even if you don't have 2 cards, you can still attack with a guy and give something else +0/+2. Sure, but I feel like with Duron Architect, every single attack with Architect you need to make count because he's most likely at most getting 2 attacks in. And outside of Braum, I feel like most of the combos with Architect are memes like Bubble Bear. but I still think he's pretty strong. I think um, some decks just can't handle the combos that Architect enables. But with that all said, I'm gonna give him 2 stars. He's fine. He's like pretty much a good example of a middle of the road kind of card. It's okay in the right type of decks, but the 3-drop slot is also pretty fought over in Demacia. There's a lot of 3-drops you would like to play in Demacia, and having to fight for the 3-drop slot is not a thing a card wants to do. Speaking of 3-drops that are fighting for the 3-drop slot, we have Duron Protege. 3 mana, 3/2, play the card, grant an ally +0/+1, and tough. It's fine. If I have room in my deck, I don't mind playing this. So I look at this card and I could like to compare it to Chainmail. Chainmail is a 1 mana burst speed spell to give something tough. So for an extra 2 mana, what are we getting? We're losing the burst speed ability of Chainmail, and in return for that 2 extra mana and the loss of the burst speed, we're getting a 3/3 worth of stats. 3/2 from the Protege and the +0/+1. That's fine. Again, it's like it's just fine. And it does curve well with certain cards like Petricite Broadwing. Petricite Broadwing with Duron into a Duron Protege curve is pretty strong, but I don't know. 3/2 bodies just not that impressive. Sure, thankfully it's a 3/2 though, so it can block Fearsome. If this was a 3/3, I'd be actually a lot more high up on this. And yes, you can argue it's technically a 3/3 because it's giving 1 health. Yeah, technically, sure. But I feel like I'd rather just play like Vanguard Sergeant in all honesty in a lot of decks, but it's fine if I want to play Chain Vest or if I'm in like a faded deck and I don't want to play Chain Vest and I want to play this over Chain Vest for some reason. But again, a lot of the time, I'd rather just play Chain Vest in all honesty. Still though, it does have some decent synergies. Things like I already mentioned it, Petricite Broadwing and Assistant Librarian, Saga Seekers, Wounded White Flames. But again, Chain Vest. So we're gonna give it 2 stars. It's fine. It's decent filler, but it feels like this is the card I'm gonna look at when I'm building decks where I'm like, okay, I want to make room for a card, and this is the card I look at to remove. Next up, Duron Sculptor. 2 mana 2/2. When you summon another ally, grant it +0/+1. Strong card. I think that is just a good simple statement and description of this card. Very strong card. Really annoying in certain decks. Like very spammy decks that try to I don't want to say completely go wide, but decks that go somewhat wide, but not full on go wide like Bandel City, Yordle, and Arms go wide, but Scouts. Like that's the deck I'm trying to explain or talk about here. Very annoying in Scouts and still pretty decent in other decks too. Like non-aggressive decks, non-mid-rangey decks, more in other words, control decks. But again, like Durand Protege in like non-scout decks, non-tempo based decks, it's not that great. Pretty good though for a 2-drop slot. 2-drops are kind of weak in Demacia. You have Bright Steel Protector, but you don't really like to play Bright Steel Protector as your 2-drop. But yeah, other 2-drops you could consider playing in your decks, Conchologist, Pharaoh's Financier. Like these are just very powerful 2 mana 2/2s that bring some value to the game. This card's trying to do its best. It's no Conchologist, but it does a pretty good job. Getting things outside of ping range, buffing like Fleet Feather Trackers, Misfortunes, Petricite Broadwings, even just Vanguard Sergeants, making it a 3/5. Very, very strong. Still though, I'm only going to give this card 4 stars. The reason it's not getting that 5th star, even though I think the card is a very powerful card, one reason. I don't think it's a good card in the late game. I feel like this card is a dead draw in the late game, and the problem with this card is decks that want this card want to draw it as early as possible, so on 2. So they're going to play all 3 of them, and drawing this in the late game, it's a really, really bad draw in the late game. You're looking for high impact stuff, and this is just terrible in the late game. So that's why it's not getting that 5th star. And now we have our first champ of the set. We got Galio. So, lots to talk about with Galio. Let's start off really quick. 7 mana 0/8 with Spell Shield and Formidable. He's a very big boy. When I'm summoned, grant other allies +0/+3 to level them up. Round has to end, and your allies have to have 25 plus total health. And then it becomes an 09, still has Formidable, still has Spell Shield, still grants the same amount of health. Now, though, the first time an ally takes damage, you get to rally. And his champion spell is Shield of Duron. 3-mana burst speed spell, grant an ally +0/+3. At the next round start, grant it +0/+2. One of the strongest cards in this expansion. Galio, though, I don't know. He's a really expensive card, and he's just bringing a lot of stats. Like, some decks just want that. Some decks just want a bunch of stats, but I mean, in my personal opinion, if you're only slightly ahead or even, Galio's not doing too much. And I don't know. I just feel like if you don't, and also if you don't level up Galio that turn or the next turn, your opponent will be able to just chip your units down, prevent Galio from leveling. And if Galio's not leveling, he's just a big boy who's getting slowly chipped down. Still, though, he is pretty good, and he is decent top end for a Demacia mid-range deck. Think like a Bright Steel formation kind of card. The thing is, Demacia mid-range didn't really need more of a top end kind of card. They had 6-mana Cythria. 6-mana Cythria is worse than Galio, don't get me wrong, but 6-mana Cythria doesn't take up the champ slot, so you can play a different champ like Lux, Poppy, Misfortune, whatever other champ you want for your mid-range Demacia deck. Still, though, I do think it's a strong effect, strong summon ability, and he has a really powerful champ spell. I'm going to give him a whole 4 stars. That 5th star is missing because I just feel like he's missing a little too much to be too strong, just a little too expensive for me to consider Galio to be very strong. But he hits a lot of the things I like. Strong ETB, enter the battlefield effect. Strong level up, that's not that difficult to get, and a very, very strong champ spell. Next up, though, what do we have? We've got Gorlith. Gorlith the Unscalable. 9 mana 0/10, tough and formidable. When I'm summoned, swap my health and your Nexus health. I can't be blocked by enemies with less health than me. I would love this card if you could target your opponent's Nexus. I don't know how OP that would be, but if you could target your opponent's Nexus, I would love it. It would be very reminiscent of the card, I can't remember the full name, I think it was just called Alex Straza from Hearthstone. I think the card was like a 9 mana 8/8 or something like that, and it sets you or your opponent to, I want to say 15 health. Could have been 10, but I think it was 15. If Gorlith was similar to that, I would be much, much higher up on this card, but as it is, you can only really target your Nexus. And even if it could target the enemy Nexus, it's not like Demacia is about to start burning people anyway. Like Demacia PNZ, Demacia Noxus, those don't sound like good burn decks, really. But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think, like, what is the best way? Like, I just think it's too expensive. I think you'd rather just play Galio or even Bright Steel formation if you just want a big top end card. Like, it's cute against more aggressive decks. You can use it to heal you. You can use it to, and it is in theory like it's enabling an OTK, kind of, but I don't know. It's just 9 mana. It's really expensive. Weak to silences too. So I'm just not in love with this card. I don't really like it at all. I'm giving it 1 star. It does a lot of unique stuff though. And if you can buff it while it's in your hand, it gets a little bit better. But the problem with that plan is there aren't really that many good ways to buff cards in your hand yet, especially with just Demacia. Demacia doesn't actually hand buff at all, I think, at the moment. Next up, Mountain Drake. 5 mana, 06, Fury, Formidable. Fury grants me +0/+2 instead of +1/+1. On paper, solid card. Solid card. Large stats, large cost, or large stats. Justifies its cost of 5 mana. 06 beats down really quickly thanks to Fury. And giving +0/+2 thanks to Formidable is kind of like getting +2/+2. So that's nice. Again, like a lot of Formidable cards, weak to silence though, so that's already kind of making me not like it. But the biggest problem with me for this card is it's 5 mana, and not even looking at other regions, just in Demacia, for the same amount of mana, you can just play Screeching Dragon, 5 mana, 4/5 Challenger Fury. And I feel like most decks would rather play Screeching Dragon, even decks that are healing or just playing formidable cards or things that are buffing units to take advantage of Formidable. I feel like a lot of those decks would still rather just play Screeching Dragon. Let's say like you're a Galio deck. I feel like having a Screeching Dragon get +3 health is just great. I mean, you could argue also like, oh, it's really good if you buff it with like Zenith Blade to give it overwhelm. Yeah, but so Screeching Dragon. I don't know. I just look at this card and I'm like, I'd rather just play Screeching Dragon over this card. So sorry. I still think it's a solid card and decent for the 5-drop slot, and it gets a little bit better if you're in some kind of health buff deck. So I'm gonna give it 2 stars. It's solid. It plays a role and it does it well, but I think there's just better things you can be doing for 5 mana in Demacia alone, not to mention other regions. Now this card, though, I got no problem giving my thoughts on this card. Petricite Broadwing. 2 mana, 0/3, Challenger, Formidable. I don't feel like I have to even talk too much about this card. 5 stars. This card is nuts. So many decks cannot beat a turn to Petricite Broadwing. It's got good synergy already too with other cards, some of the newer cards, some of the older cards. For example, we've already seen a Duron Sculptor, Shield of Duron, Quick Quill, just tough. Card's great. If you can give it regeneration, more health, this card is crazy good. A little weak to silence. Like, look out for Equinoxes, I'd say, but even then, the card is still so nuts. In fact, it's so good, it actually kind of slightly is bringing a Felios back because it's a very good crescendum hit. So, again, 5 stars. Card's just so good. By itself, it's already a great card with a little bit of other help from other cards. So, like, moon weapons from Aphelios, like Severum, buffs in general from other cards, it gets even better. So a whole 5 stars. Honestly, I could see this card getting nerfed. I don't know how you would nerf it, but I could see it getting nerfed in the future. Next up, though, Pestilence Hound, another Petricite card. Very simple card here. 1 mana, 0/2 with Formidable. It's okay. That's all I really have to say about this guy. He is okay. Solid 1-drop if you're just a mid-range deck that just needs to get on the board early. I don't think we're ever going to see a formidable aggro deck, but if that happens, Pestilence Hound would be decent in it too. But yeah, pretty solid 1-drop for a formidable deck, a health buff deck, whatever you want to call it. Sure, if you ping it, if your opponent pings it, it is pretty much attacking for 1, but the upside of being able to buff this with like Shield of Duron is so big. And the fact that a Galio will turn this into a 5/5 pretty much in the late game is pretty good. Still though, pretty much just filler for a deck, but it's good filler, so I'm gonna give it a whole 3 stars. Just a strong, solid 1-drop. Kind of sucks in the late game though, but a lot of 1-drops suck in the late game, really. Next up, Petricite Stag. Oh boy, this card. I don't know what to think about this card. I don't think it's good. I think it's interesting, though. 4 mana, 3/5 support. I take all damage for my supported ally this round. So it's bad Shen. It's even got the same cost and stat line as Shen, but it's no Shen. Which is fine. It's like, if this random epic was just stronger than a champion, well, you know, Reddit would never let Riot live it down. They'd be like, oh, why would I ever play Shen? Why don't I just play Petricite Stag? But yeah, I'm not too much of a fan of this card. The biggest thing I can say about this, it does let you play like a Demacia mid-range deck that would like to play Shen, but it means you don't have to go into Ionia. The problem is Ionia is kind of nice to go into for Demacia mid-range thanks to things like Twin Disciplines, Counter Spells, Shen. So yeah, I don't really understand this card. In theory, you can use it to protect a unit who you want to attack in with, but don't think will stay alive, but want to keep alive, that's a very niche scenario, but I think there's enough unique stuff going on with this guy, and there's a little bit of potential, and I can see some future deck that would like this. Like, in other words, a weird Demacia deck that wants to protect its unit, but doesn't want to play Ionia. So there's some potential here, so 1 star from me. Now then, the next card. Shield of Duron. 3 mana burst speed spell, grant an ally +0/+3, and the next round start granted +0/+2. We've already talked about this a little bit. The card is absurd. Not just on formidable units, which it's obviously meant to be used on. There's obviously intent are designed with intent to be used on formidable units, giving them more stats, you know, like for basically +0/+5 here. That's like 5/5 of stats for a formidable unit. Yeah, that's pretty good. Even outside of that, it's still pretty good. Casting Shield Durran on, say, like a Phalios, Misfortune. That's crazy. On a Lux, on Petricite Broadwing, Braum. Put this on a Braum. You've got an 0/11 Braum. Not many things are taking down a 0/11 Braum. So yeah, this card is pretty great. I've actually been cutting sharp sights in certain decks to fit more shield. I haven't cut sharp sight completely, but that's just showing how strong Shield of Durand is that it can, while I don't think it does beat sharp sight in most scenarios, the fact that I can actually consider replacing sharp sight with shield should go and show how strong the card is. I still do think sharp sight's just a better card. Sharp sight, sure, its buff is not permanent and it gives less health, but the whole being able to block elusives thing is pretty nice, and giving some little bit of power is nice too to actually win combats. Still though, this card is crazy good. One of the best cards in this expansion. 5 whole stars from me. And now, the last card of Demacia. Winds of War. 3 mana, slow spell. I hate slow spells, but let's go on. Let's see what it's doing. Heal an ally to full. Okay, not bad. Then that ally and an enemy strike each other. Slow speed. Oh boy. Slow speed fight spells, slow speed strike spells, whatever you want to call them, are awful. They are not good at all. They're fine if you don't have better options. Here's the thing though. Demacia already has single combat, strafing strike, and concerted strike. I'd rather just play those cards. Sure, if I'm not playing dragons, strafing strike's a little weak, but still, between single combat and concerted strike, Winds of War kind of sucks. I would play a couple, maybe like 1 or 2 Winds of War in a deck that's playing things like Galio. Like the heal is nice, like with some healing synergy and formidable synergy. I would consider like freeing up 1 or 2 slots in my deck for a Winds of War, but outside of that, I don't like this card at all. But still, because of that scenario I just mentioned, the healing synergy, formidable synergy, it gets a 2 star from me. Anyway though, that's it for Demacia. 2 more regions to go. Let's head into our next one. We have Frejord. Frejord, according to a lot of people, kind of got the short end of the stick. They got a new champ as well, and that's why a lot of people are like, oh, mega laughing, frejord. They got udir. Poor udir. But yeah, frejord. What do we start with here? We're starting with bone scryer. Bone scryer, I mean, like, it's fine. 2 mana 0/5. 2 mana 0/5. When I survive damage, deal 1 to the enemy nexus. Okay. So it's Crimson Disciple, the 2 mana 2/3, that says pretty much the exact same text line. So it has the exact same amount of stats, exact same amount of cost. Its stat line is allocated just all into its health, all into toughness, whatever you want to call it. So it's 0/5 instead of a 2/3. It's fine. It's a solid card. Here's the problem though. It is very good in one archetype and one archetype only. That's Scargrounds. The problem is Scargrounds sucks. So very strong Scargrounds card here. It's nothing crazy going on here, but if Scargrounds ever becomes good, this card is good. Like, this card is pretty much just tied to however good Scargrounds is, unless, of course, new cards get released. Still, though, very, very powerful in that archetype, but that archetype's not that good. So it plays it's a role player in its deck, but lack of versatility kind of prevents me from giving it too many stars, so I'm only going to give it 2. Next up, Hayara Allseer. 6 mana 5/5. When I'm summoned, create a stance swamp in hand. It costs 0 this round. I like this card. It's slow and expensive, but it's got some nice versatility because of a 0 mana stance swamp. Not much to talk about here, really. 5/5 is fine. I like to compare this to Shaman's Call, the 6 mana, I think it's burst speed spell. It will give you 2 stance swamps that also cost 0. You're pretty much trading off the 6 mana burst speed spell for you're trading off 1 free stance swap for a 5/5 basically, compared to Shaman's Call, and I think it's a fair trade. And in my opinion, I don't know. It's like you have to think about like priority passing. By playing the Allseer, you're passing priority. Playing Shaman's Call, you don't pass priority, so you could play 1 stance swamp and then priority passes. So there's all kinds of things to be thought of with this card, but it's still fine. I'm only going to give it 1 star now. And the reason for that is it feels like it's meant to be some kind of top end for some Freljord decks. And I feel like Freljord has enough top end things. And even in an Udir deck or a deck that cares about stance swaps, I feel like there's just better out there. So only getting 1 star from me, but in a slower meta, I like this card, brings a decent amount of value. So maybe if the meta slowed down, I could see this getting good. Next up, though, Mammoth Shaman. 6 mana 4/4 with Overwhelm. Round End. This is the first of the transformation cards we're going to see, which were introduced in this set as well. But Round End, if you've damaged the enemy nexus this round, transform me into Mammoth Rager. What is a Mammoth Rager? 6 mana 6/6 with Overwhelm. Round start, grant me +2/+2. So immediately, this card is fighting for the 6-drop slot with Alpha Wildclaw. I think that's the name of the card, the 6 mana 7/6 with Overwhelm. In theory, this card can get bigger than the Wildclaw. The problem is you have to actually damage the enemy nexus. That's a little tough to do, especially if you're not attacking on 6. And you might even want to play a unit on 6 before you even attack, and in that case, Wildclaw is just better. And even if you do flip this, it is kind of slow. Sure, it's a little hard to remove with just regular removal. Even if it does flip into the Rager, even if your opponent silences it, it's still a 6/6 at the very least. But I don't know. I'm not a fan of this card. I just think it's too slow. Its focus is on being big, which it does that well. It's pretty good at getting big, but it's just too slow. And I feel like no deck really wants this. Like big overwhelm units or overwhelm decks would rather just play Wild Claw most of the time. So I'm going to give it 1 star. It's fine. It's got strengths to it. Maybe in the future I could see like a weird frejord Bilgewater deck. But for now, I'd rather just play Wild Claw over this card. Anyway, another of the shamans, Merkwolf Shaman. 4 mana 3/3 with regen. Okay. Very rare to see regen given to a lot of cards. Not really a common keyword, so I'm always interested in cards with regen. Round end, damage the enemy nexus to transform. He becomes the Merkwolf Rager. 4 mana 5/5, still has regen. When I transform, draw a unit. So it's kind of like a Babbling Bjerg, but you have to transform the guy, so he has to survive the turn, and he's not as selective as Babbling Bjerg. And I mentioned Babbling Bjerg because they're in the same 4-drop slot. The trade-off is, though, you're getting a Garen, like a 5/5 with regen that's basically Garen. Sure, it's like there's no potential level up, which is one of Garen's strengths, and no judgment, which is another of Garen's strength. But still, a 4 mana 5/5 with regen, that will slow the game down a lot. That's just really annoying and hard to deal with. I like the card. I like it in like quite a few decks, lower decks, like more control-y decks, just to get on the field as a wall to basically make your opponent's combats more annoying. Assuming, of course, you flip it, which could be a little tough. But yeah, I like it as a 1 or a 2 in a lot of decks. But yeah, like decent body. Well, when it flips, great body with a strong ability. Drawing a card is always a good effect. But yeah, like 3 health on a 4-drop is a little weak, but you are in Freljord. You're in the land of Troll Chant, so you might use a Troll Chant to save this and try to make it flip. So I'm gonna give it 2 stars though. I just really don't like 3 health on a 4-drop. But it is pretty powerful. Next up, mentioned this a little bit already, Shaman's Call. 6 mana burst speed spell, create 2 fleeting 0-cost stance swaps in hand. So they're fleeting, so you gotta cast them right away. I think it's fine. Again, like I was saying earlier, I kind of like Hyara All-Seer for most decks, except this burst speed is nice. And unlike Hyara All-Seer, Shaman's Call can work with other decks. In other words, there is synergy with other decks or with other cards, other regions, unlike Hyara All-Seer, who doesn't really have much potential synergy. That's the word. In other words, spell-based decks, or not even spell-based decks, but spells matter decks. So big spells matter, or spells matter. So things like Karma, Lux, and Jace are who I think of when I look at Shaman's Call. And in those decks, it's pretty decent, like a Freljord, Demacia, Lux deck seems kind of cute. Maybe a Jace, PNZ, Freljord deck as well. Seems like there might be something there. So yeah, I'm going to give it 2 stars because I think it has good synergy and there's a lot of potential here. So 2 stars from me. Oh, I don't even know about this card. Don't even get me started with this card. Spirits Unleash. 5 mana slow spell. Grant your allies +1/+1, then deal 1 to everything. What is this card? I don't even know. Like, I feel like it should be obvious what I think of this card, but I don't get it. What deck wants this? Scargrounds? Like, that's the only thing I can think of that wants this deck is Scargrounds, and in all honesty, I'd rather play Ice Shards. Ice Shards is cheaper, it's fast speed, and I mean, sure, you're getting +1/+1 to all of your units to kind of negate the deal 1 to everything, but even then I don't like it. So like you could technically read it as like grant your allies +1/+0, then deal 1 to your opponent's board, and I guess your nexus as well. That's not worth 5 mana in my opinion. That's not worth 5 mana at all. So I'm not a fan of this. Maybe if it was at 4 mana or it was fast speed, I'd like it more. But as it is now, 5 mana and slow speed, it's a whole 0 stars from me. Next up. Oh, this card. Tusk Speaker. 2 mana, 3/2, overwhelm, play, deal 1 to all Nexuses. Nexi? This card is pretty much a good definition of a boring card. A boring card that's a good card, though. Not much to talk about it. Just strong body, solid body, 2 mana for a 3/2. Good stats for its cost. Overwhelm. Pretty good, too. Good keyword. Keeps it relatively relevant even in the late game. And its playability is also pretty good, giving you off-turn plunders. So when you don't have the attack token, you can play this guy to plunder, slash level, work towards a level up of your Sejuani or a Gangplank or something. Card's great. It's got a lot of versatility, good stats for the cost. I'm giving it 4 stars though. And now you might say, why only 4 stars? It just doesn't feel OP. Like, it feels good. Don't get me wrong. It feels good and strong. But 5 stars I usually reserve for those cards that feel like, wow, this card is very annoying. Wow, this card is strong. I look at Tusk Speaker and I'm not looking at the card like, I'm like, wow, oh no, I'm in trouble. I'm like, okay, it's a fine card. It's solid. It's a good card. It plays a role in a deck, but it does it really, really well. So I like it. Good early game unit that's also not terrible in the late game. So it gets the whole 4 stars from me. Now then, Udir. This guy was coming. You guys all knew that we were going to be talking about him. And there's a lot of stuff to talk about with this guy. So, Udir is a 5 mana 4/4. No keywords. Just a 5 mana 4/4. When Udir is summoned or strikes, creates a stance swamp in hand. Or if you have one already, reduce its cost to 0. To level up Udir, you have to have damaged the enemy Nexus 7 times this game. When Udir levels up, he still doesn't have a keyword. He gets +1/+1, and then he gets another +1/+1 for each stance you've cast this game. So it's not even a powerful level up, and it's a difficult level up to achieve. I hate him. I'm sorry. He's just, I don't know. I like the concept of Udir because he reminds me of Aphelios, and I love Aphelios. I don't know. I don't see like the deck. Like, I don't know. What are they trying to do with Udir? Is he supposed to be a support backline unit? In which case, why would you make it so he wants to strike? After you bore stance him, then he can start striking. In which case, that's really slow. That's the biggest problem. He's understated. His stances are expensive. Maybe combined with like some Demacia deck, you can have him strike with single combats and stuff. But even then, that's, I don't know. The game is really fast is all I'm trying to say. Like Runeterra, Legends of Runeterra is really, really fast. The meta is really fast now, and you can't be spending time just casting these stances for 3 mana. Like 3 mana, give an ally +0/+2 and regen. It's fine. 3 mana, slow speed ice shards. Okay. And then to top it all off, his chance spell is Spirits Unleashed. Not a good champ spell. I already talked about the spell itself. I don't even think that spell is good, even as a champ spell. So there's not really much I like about Udir. I like that he's, in theory, infinite value because of the stances. Like, that's cool, but competitive-wise, I think he sucks. But he is fun, I will say that. And if the meta does slow down, or if they release cards that help slow down the meta for at least Frejord, I can see him doing really well as, say, like a secondary support champion to help you slow the game down and get some value as you work towards your actual win con, whatever it may be. So I'm going to give him 2 stars. Very, very low rating for a champ, but I think he deserves only 2. Sorry, Udir. Next card. Oh, speaking of cards, here's another reason why I think Udir is not that good. Vulpine Wanderer. 2 mana 2/2. When I'm summoned, create a stance swap in hand. If I care about stances, I'm just calling Vulpine Wanderer. I don't think Vulpine Wanderer goes in every Frejord deck. I think Vulpine Wanderer fights for the 2-drop slot with Avaros and Sentry, but this is still a pretty good card. In theory, you can play the Wanderer, and then the next turn you can curve out with your stance, which you probably don't want to do it, but Ram stance to get ice shards basically is not out of the question in case your opponent is trying to flood the board. So yeah, I think the card is great. Not much to talk about it with it. Solid stat line, doesn't die to a ping. Pretty much like a conchologist, Pharaoh's Financier, but in Freljord, not as strong as those cards, but still pretty strong. 2-mana 2/2s that bring versatility are very strong cards. 5 whole stars from me. And our last Freljord card, Wrath of the Freljord. Wrath of the Freljord is a 8-mana 8/8 with Overwhelm. Enemies with 3 or less power can't block. So that's all of your units. They can't block any of your units as long as this thing is on the field. Some people, when they first saw this card, are like, oh, okay, it's not that bad, because they read it as that enemies with 3 or less power can't block Wrath of the Freljord, and then they reread the card and they're like, oh, wow, that's really strong. Here's the thing. 8 mana. 8 mana is really expensive. Sure, don't get me wrong, Freljord is a ramp region, but ramp hasn't been that good for a while. And Wrath of the Freljord is good top end, even in non-ramp decks, but just mid-range decks that are playing Freljord. But I don't know. 8 mana is really expensive, but this is a game-ending card. This card basically says, like, okay, I come down and removal check. That's pretty much what it is. It's like, can you stop me? It's like, do you have a vengeance? Do you have a silence? Because even if you stun the card, you might not be able to block. It's like, let's say you stun it. It's like, okay, cool, you stun the Wrath of the Freljord, but its ability is still going through. Your opponent can't block with 3 or less power cards. So I don't know. Strong card, super fearsome. Maybe I could see it also in, I already mentioned ramp decks, but also Targon's Peak decks might play this too. So I think there's some potential with the card. Decent for a ramp target, pretty okay as a top end for Freljord mid-range deck. So I'm going to give it a whole 3 stars. But compared to other like strong 8-drops, I think there are better 8-drops in other regions, namely Captain Farron. But it's still a pretty good 8-drop. And now for our last region, probably the most hated region in the game at the moment, Bandel City. Oh boy. So Bandel City got 2 new champions. That's the word. They also got a new keyword as well. They got the other keyword of the set. They got attach. I mean, how do I even explain attach? Basically, attaches, you play a unit on top of a unit, and then the unit's stats and keywords go onto that unit, and if the unit dies, the attached units get recalled back to the hand, but it's not actually a recall, it's a bounce, in other words. So in other words, it's not activating recall synergy. It's kind of hard to explain, and there's all kinds of rule nuances with attach. Anyway, let's talk about the first card. Nothing with attach here. Assistant Librarian. This card I love and hate at the same time. 2-mana 2/2 with FaeAid. Oh boy. FaeAid has been, depending on who you ask, a success. At least it's a very strong keyword, and this thing has FaeAid. Nexus Strike. Draw a spell that costs 3 or less. Oh boy. So it's a River Shaper for 1 less mana. The trade-off is it has to strike the Nexus, but it also has FaeAid. Okay. And then you also, the FaeAid is what makes this card scary. I mean, the simple play is you play this on 2, and then you play Zenith Blade. Your opponent's in a bad spot then. But yeah, like there's a lot of great synergies with this. Chainmails, attach units. Zenith Blades. There's a lot of good stuff here. This card is crazy. Um, Comes down earlier than Wounded White Flame 2, a turn later than Saga Seeker, so you've got a faded unit in the 1, 2, and 3 drop slot now if you're building a faded deck. The problem is if you're building this with, like, say, Pantheon, that means you would be Targon, Bandel City, and I feel like Pantheon's still best in Demacia, but it's still something to consider. Still, though, this card is so good. 5 stars. The card snowballs really well. The card is fairly versatile. It's a Fae too, so not something I mentioned, but Fae synergy is a thing, so there's that as well. So watch out, in other words, for this card. It can win a game all by itself. Next up, another one of these transform cards, 2 mana 1/2, Bitsy Lizard. Ping the enemy nexus or damage the enemy nexus to transform the guy at the end of the round. He turns into a lava lizard, which is a 2 mana 3/4. That's it. No keywords, no nothing. Starts as a vanilla 1/2 for 2, and then he turns into a 3/4. That's fine. There's nothing great there, in all honesty. I mean, for 2 mana, a 3/4 is fine. Like, it's becoming a 3/4 at turn 3, which is fine. Like, that's a Badger Bear, but Badger Bear is not that great. With some transformation synergy, it gets a little bit better, but there's not that much transformation synergy in the game at the moment. Maybe in the future with more transformation synergy, I can see this card becoming a thing, but as it stands now, there are just other 2-drops I would rather play, even in Bandel City alone. Hello, Conchologist. So for that reason, I'm only giving it 1 star. And that 1 star is pretty much just because of the potential for transformation synergy, which does already kind of exist a little bit. Blastcone Seedling. 2 mana 2/2. Very simple card. 2 mana 2/2. Play the card. Give me barrier this round or grant me impact. Also, quick note, multi-region card. It's a Bandel City Ionia card, and it's also a Fae. So, multi-region, so Bandel Tree likes it. It's getting some Fae synergy. It's a solid card. Not great, not bad. It's just solid is the best way to describe this thing. But yeah, I like it. I think it is okay. It's a fine filler card. Helps you go wide in, say, like Yodel and Arm decks, Fae decks, etc., etc. Thanks to, we'll look at it later, Gleaming Lantern. It can be played for technically 0 mana, and you should always be afraid of 0 mana things because of the potential to just be spammed for free. So I'm going to give it a whole 2 stars. It's okay. It plays a role. It comes down. It's never really a scary card, but it's solid. Decent on offense, decent on defense, thanks to its barrier or impact mode. Next up. Our transformation synergy I was hinting at before, Chief Nakotok. 3 mana 3/3. When an ally transforms, fully heal it and grant it +1/+1. I've heard, I haven't tested it out myself, but I heard this card does not work with concurrent timelines. I have no idea if that's true. If that is true, Nakotok is terrible. Even if it is true, Nakotok is still not that good. When I first saw Nakotok, I was like, wow, this card is pretty solid for like a timelines deck or even a transformation deck. And then I thought about it more and I was like, well, it's kind of slow. Like it's coming down on 3 and it's not doing anything. Like maybe it's eating removal, but is your opponent that scared of a +1/+1 buff to a couple of cards in your deck? I don't know. Like obviously with Gnar, because Gnar transforms back and forth. That's cute, but even then, again, it's a problem with Runeterra, or not even a problem, but it's just the state of Runeterra is the game is really fast, and this card is really slow. This card wants to be in a like dirtily grind fest where it's trying to be like a grindy mid-range deck that's using its transformations to get a little bit bigger than the other opponent's decks, and that's not what the meta is like at the moment. So 1 star from me. There is potential, maybe with more transform cards and transform synergies. Nakotok will be good, But since Nakotak is actually the only transformation synergy card, I don't think it's enough to actually make me want to play Nakotak. Now then, FaeAid. FaeAid is a 3-mana burst speed spell. Create a Hungry Owl Cat in hand, then grant Fae allies in hand +1/+1. It's fine. It's a little slow, and hand buffs are not that great, but +1/+1 is an okay hand buff. And the burst speed is nice because you don't have to pass priority. I think it's fine. You're technically getting a 3/2 Owl Cat, so it's okay if you're just trying to get a unit to put some buffs on, because Owl Cats are decent to put buffs on thanks to their spell shield. And it helps buff your other units. Definitely only pretty much going to be seeing play in Fae decks. I'm going to give it a 3. I think it's an okay card, solid filler, but I can see it getting cut from other decks. But it's a solid card to play if you're trying to play some attached shenanigans, because it buffs your attached units too. Because I'm pretty sure all the attached units are Fae. Anyway, more Fae stuff. Fae Sprout. 1 mana burst speed spell. Manifest a Fae, granted +1/+1. So, card's great. I like this card. So you're getting versatility here, and for 1 mana, you're getting both versatility to choose whatever you want, whatever it shows you, of course, and then a +1/+1 buff on top of that. So I like it. Helps smooth out your curves in more mid-rangey decks, so Yordle and Arm decks and stuff like that. And it's got a little bit of Shellfolk synergy for control decks. You could play this as like a 1 or a 2 of in Shellfolk decks. I feel like there are better cards to play than this in Shellfolk, but it is definitely a consideration because it can get Tasty Faefolk. And Tasty Faefolk might be the only way you can heal in certain Shellfolk decks. Still, though, it's got a lot of versatility, but it does seem a little limited to only 2 decks at best. Fae Go Wide decks, or just Fae decks in general, and potentially Shellfolk, which is not doing that hot right now, so it's going to get a whole 3 stars from me. And Friendship. 4 mana burst speed spell. Give an ally barrier or spell shield this round. Unlike Bastion, the spell shield is only temporary for the round, so don't think this is just better Bastion. I still think it's a fine spell, a fine card. The only problem is I like Stress Defense more because you can cast Stress Defense using only your spell mana, so you can... Well, obviously, this is meant to protect your cards, obviously. And I feel like being able to cast a protection spell with only spell mana is huge for protection spells, so you can play things on curve. Good example, Vhagar. Casting Vhagar on 4 for darkness is very big, and having the 3 spell mana to, at the very least, bluff and then maybe even cast a 3 mana protection spell like Miscall or Stress Defense is very big. Friendship costs 4 mana. Still, though, I think it's a solid spell, and giving Spell Shield is nice. So maybe in the right deck, I think this is good. Like a combo deck that's trying to like OTK someone, which we are seeing that a little bit. It's okay as like a 1 or a 2 of, so I like it. It's got a role to fulfill, so I'm giving it 2 stars. And the next card. This card is basically, in my opinion, what's holding Fae decks together. Gleaming Lantern. 3 mana, 3/3. Each round, the first Fae you play costs 2 less. That includes the round it is summoned as well. So you can summon Gleaming Lantern, and that same turn, you can summon a 0 mana Fae if it costs a 2, of course. So turn 3, you can play like Gleaming Lantern, and then you can play Blastcone Seedling, for example. This is the glue that's holding Fae together, like I said earlier. Strong effect, fast mana is really, really strong. 3 health is not the greatest, but it's not awful. Survives Avalanche, survives Mystic Shot, so that's solid. Yeah, I think the card's great. Obviously, only really goes in Fae decks, though, but it does really, really well in those decks, so 4 stars for me. And since itself is a Fae, you can find it from things like Fae Sprout, Gleaming Lantern will affect other Gleaming Lanterns as well, so pretty good. Do I even need to talk too much about this guy? I feel like we all know exactly what I'm going to rate Gnar. So Gnar, I mean, spoilers, he's 5 stars. I guess I should talk more about like why exactly he's 5 stars. He's busted. So Gnar, he's a 4 mana 4/3 Yordle, so he's got Yordle synergy if you care about that. He's got quick attack, strong keyword. He's in Frejord, Bandel City multi-region, so you know, Bandel Tree. You can technically play him in Frejord if you want, which is another reason why Udir kind of sucks, because Gnar is just a very general, versatile champion, and a lot of Udir decks feel like they're just worse than anything you could play Gnar in. Like a lot of Udir decks feel like they would just be better if they removed Udir for Gnar. And then on top of all that, 4/3, so that's a pretty solid stat line for a 4-drop. Not great, but not bad. Every time Gnar strikes, he creates a Pokey Stick, or if you already have one in hand, it reduces its cost by 1. Okay, Pokey Stick's nuts. Imagine if, like, Quinn created a Sharp Sight every time she struck. That'd be crazy. And Pokey Stick is pretty much the 2-mana Bandel City staple. Like, almost every Bandel City deck is playing 2 to 3 Pokey Sticks, and Gnar just creates them. And then to level up Gnar, damage the enemy nexus this round. That's it. Like, meanwhile, Udir is like, I've got to damage the nexus 7 times. And then, so what does he do when he levels up? He gets +2/+2, which is already above par for a level up. Most champs just get +1/+1. Gnar's getting +2/+2. And he turns into Mega Gnar. Mega Gnar has quick attack still, and now he gets Overwhelm. Okay. Quick attack and Overwhelm. What a combo. That's great. When he levels up, grant the strongest enemy vulnerable. So it's like he gets some pseudo removal on top of all of this nonsense he's got going on with him. And as a 4-mana 6/5 with quick attack and Overwhelm, he's killing most things that he's given vulnerable to. And then at the end of the round, if Gnar has seen you start the round with the attack token, he transforms back into mini Gnar, regular Gnar, which means he can, in theory, transform back into Mega Gnar again and remove another unit, or at least give it vulnerable. And that vulnerable is a permanent vulnerable. So if your opponent somehow saves the unit that was vulnerable, either through like a stun, a kill spell, a combat trick, it's still vulnerable. It's one of the reasons, like, remember Merciless Hunter? Before she was nerfed, she was a 4/3, 3-mana 4/3 with Fearsome. Her vulnerable granting was permanent too, and that's one of the reasons she was so strong. That and Shurima was really pushed at the time. And to top it all off, Gnar's champ spell is Wallop. Wallop is a 3-mana fast speed spell to deal 1 to an enemy and stun it. So a fast speed stun that also pings. So wow. That's a good champ spell. Not a great champ spell, just a solid champ spell. He's got a lot of things going on. Compared to something like, let's say, Release Poppy. Release Poppy, you could be like, okay, Poppy's busted, but at least her champ spell is bad. There's nothing bad about Gnar. Like, there is not a single negative about Gnar. There are just situations where he's less good, but there's nothing bad about Gnar, where it's like, oh yeah, like Irelia. When Irelia was really good, she's like, yeah, Irelia's good, but at least her champ spell's bad. Poppy's good, but at least her champ spell's bad. Gnar, he's got a great champ spell. Use Wallop to try and protect your Gnar if your opponent tries to challenge Gnar with, say, like a Petricite Broadwing. Your opponent tries to use like combat tricks to fight Mega Gnar who's challenging the unit that's now vulnerable, and then they're like, oh, okay, Wallop, and you just wasted your combat trick. So yeah, he's great. He's nuts. He's very versatile. I think he's the most played champ at the moment of making this video. 5 stars. I already said it would be 5 stars. He's 5 stars. He's crazy. He's probably the strongest card from this entire expansion. Definitely the strongest champion compared to Udir, Galio, and Yuumi? Yeah, Yuumi's the 4th one. Anyway, enough about Gnar before I get too mad about Gnar. The next card we got Grandfather Fae. 2-mana 1/2. He's a Fae as well. multi-region as well. When I'm summoned, create an owl cat, hungry owl cat in hand. When you summon another Fae, grant it +1/+0. Good card, good effect. Body's a little weak, but Fae are fine. Like, they're not a great archetype, but they're not bad. Like, they're a solid archetype that seem to be fitting a nice tier 2 slot in the current meta. Grandfather Fae is one of the reasons why. Being able to buff your other Fae, even though it is just a attack buff, a power buff instead of a health buff, is still pretty strong. And Grandfather Fae giving you a unit, so even if your opponent kills Grandfather Fae, cool, you still got a Hungry Owl Cat, a 2/1 with Spell Shield for 1 mana. That's pretty strong. So yeah, what am I gonna give you, Grandfather Fae? I'm gonna give you 4 stars. The guy is pretty good. If it weren't for his stat line, I would give him a little bit extra, and yeah, I'm just gonna give him 5. Like, he does kind of suck in combat himself, but I don't know. He's pretty good. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, maybe he is 5 stars. But if he was a 2/2, I would definitely give him 5 stars easily. 1/2 kind of just sucks though. If your opponent puts on pressure, he is a little bad. But thanks to the things like Gleaming Lantern, and being able to be found off of like Fae Sprout, I like the guy. I think he's pretty strong. Anyway, next up. Okay, we're gonna start talking about some of the bad cards now, I believe. Which honestly, like after seeing Gnar, it's only fair they get some bad cards, right? Heroic Refrain. 3 mana, burst speed spell. Give 2 allies +2/+1 this round. Yeah, this card's not good. I'm not gonna mince words here. We Stand Together is pretty much the same thing, except the stats are reverse, +1/+2. We Stand Together is not that good. This card is worse than We Stand Together. Gives less health than We Stand Together. That's usually bad. The only positive thing about this card is it is 3 mana, so you can find it off of Conchologist, and it is a pretty solid hit off of Conchologist, but actually putting it in your deck, I don't think you would ever put this in any deck. So 1 star for me. I'm giving it a 1 star because it has some potential. Like, the potential is spells, synergy, and combat tricks. Like some weird go wide, spell synergy, combat trick, like deck that needs a combat trick. Being able to be cast with only spell mana is the only thing that's saving it, really. So 3 star, or sorry, 3. This thing wish it got 3 stars. 1 star from me. And Hothead. 3 mana, 4/2, attack, grant the top champion in your deck +1/+1, and add a random keyword. Also a multi-region card and a Yordle. Shurima, Bandel City. Even though it is okay for, say, Bandel Tree already has Bomber Twins as their Shurima card, so they wouldn't really play this. Pretty okay card to find off of Mayor, I guess, but even then, I'm not too high up on this card, especially when actually putting it in my deck. I don't think this card is good in a deck outside of meme decks like Mono Fiora or Zoe or something. RNG really screws this card. That and the fact that it actually has to attack, and attacking by turn 3. By turn 3, a 4/2 for 3 is not getting multiple strikes, if even 1, because Mystic Shot. So yeah, it's mostly a meme, so I'm going to give it 0 stars. I don't think even in a weird Mono Fiora, Shurima, Demacia, Fiora deck, I don't even think they would play this, and people have tried that deck before. Next up, though, if you ask Reddit, Mini T. Mini T should get 5 stars according to how mad this card makes Reddit, but it's not 5 stars. I'm sorry. Mini T is a 7 mana 6/6, also a transformation card. Basically, if you damage the enemy's Nexus, it gets to transform into Mega T. Mega T is a 7 mana 8/8 with impact that basically at the start of the round mini morphs your opponent's strongest unit, and also makes it so that the Mini-T it mini morphs into can't block. That's a strong effect. Don't get me wrong. That is a very, very strong effect. It's 7 mana. What deck... Let me ask 2 questions for this card, for people who think it's good. What deck wants this card? And what deck is this a card a problem for? There's not really like a slow, grindy deck is what wants this card, but slow, grindy decks have better options than this. Things like Commander Ladros with their Shadow Isles. Uh, Darkness has a million things better than this. Maybe like some Swain Bandel City nonsense. They're already playing Leviathans anyway. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe some weird mono Bandel City deck, but that sounds awful. It's not even multi-region too, so you can't really generate it from, say, Mayor. I guess it's an epic, so you can find it from Telescope. You also have to actually damage your enemy Nexus to make it transform. Um, and again, my second question, what is this good against? Like, what deck is afraid of Mini T? What is it strong against? It's not strong against the aggro decks. The aggro decks are killing you by turn 7. Mid-range decks, this is too slow. You play a 7 mana Mini T against your mid-range opponent, they're like, okay, I'm just gonna go wide or rally or yodel in arms or whatever and kill you. Control decks, that's funny. You play a 7 mana 6/6 that does nothing. Those just vengeance it or mini morph it or silence it with like an Equinox from a Spacey Sketcher or a Zoe or something, or kick it with like a Lee Sin. So yeah, I don't really see what this card is trying to do and what decks it's trying to beat. You could say like, oh, it's good against last breath cards like Commander Ladros. Commander Ladros decks are playing 3 Vengeances. You're not landing a mini T against Commander Ladros. I'm sorry. Maybe in the future, again, like I say, maybe there's some weird transform synergies in the future, but as it stands now with the cards in the game, card is trash. I'm sorry. It is a whole 0 stars from me. I don't think this card is good at all. Oh, speaking of cards I don't think that are good, Mushroom Ring, 3 mana 2/2, multi-region card, and it's a Fae. 3 mana 2/2 with quick attack. When I'm summoned or round start, give me power this round equal to the number of other allied Fae in play or attached. So it gets bigger, but it's only a temporary growth, a temporary buff, which is fine. If this thing kept getting bigger permanently, that'd be pretty strong. But it doesn't, and honestly, even if that was a permanent buff, would it even be that good? I don't think so. I honestly think if it was a grant instead of a give for the round, it still would be a bad card. But yeah, like let's say you have like 3 other Fae in round. That makes this a 5/2 with quick attack. Cool. So what? Chump it. Mystic shot it. Brittle steel it. Freeze it. Whatever. I don't know. I don't think it's good. Like it's so easy to deal with like a 2 health unit, I think, in the meta, especially by turn 3. Um so yeah, I'm not a fan of this card. I don't think there's anything for it. It's obviously meant to be payoff for Fae, but I think Fae has better payoff than this card, so I'm giving it 0 stars. It's in an okay archetype, like Fae's a good archetype, it's just not good payoff. And Papercraft Dragon, also a Fae. 5 mana 2/2, double attack, attach. Card is crazy good. I underestimated this card when I first saw it. I was like, wow, 5 mana is a lot of mana. But I always underestimate how strong double attack is. Can't really blame me. Double attacks hasn't really seen too much popularity in metas outside of things like, I guess, Lucian and Flurry of Fist are the only 2 times we've ever seen double attack really see much popularity. But yeah, like buffing things with this card and then you giving that unit overwhelm and then using things like counter spells or spell shields and stuff to protect it while it OTKs your opponent, pretty strong. Still though, it is a little expensive. So it could be a dud. If you draw too many of these, it's like, okay, I drew 3 Papercraft Dragons. That's a little too many Papercraft Dragons. So I'm giving it only 4 stars. It's missing out on that 1 star because it is a little expensive. But yeah, it's still a strong card. Don't get me wrong. Okay, well, speaking about like strong cards, this is definitely not a strong card. Primal Strength. 4 mana, Burst speed spell, grant an ally +2/+2, and impact. Yeah, this card's not good. This card is garbage. Not much to talk about with this card. I don't see any deck ever playing this card. It's not even 3 mana, so you can't even be like, well, you can find it from Conchologist, because you can't. Flame Spitter is +2/+0 and grants impact. You're paying an extra 2 mana for 2 health compared to Flame Spitter. And Flame Spitter is not even that good. So, yeah, this card is bad, bad, bad. Expensive and doesn't really do too much. 0 stars. Next up, though. Oh boy, more bad cards. Well, we've had some good cards, so more bad cards, really, right? Prowling Projectile. Yeah. It's a ping. 2 mana fast speed spell. Deal 1 to a unit. Grant an ally +1/+0. It's a ping that triggers FaeAid. Cool. I'd rather just play Pokestick. I mean, if Bandel City was lacking in... Here's the thing. If Bandel City was lacking in pings, this would be an okay ping if they really wanted to play pings, but between Pokestick and Group Shot, and if you go even further, Poison Dart, Bandel City has more than enough pings. We don't need to run Prowling Projectile. And you might say, like, okay, but it's obviously meant for some kind of FaeAid deck. Yeah, but I'm still not going to play this in my FaeAid deck. I'd rather play, like, actual good spells in my FaeAid deck. Plus, it's a Bandle City only card, too, so that means your FaeAid deck's playing probably Bandle City Target and not Demacia, so you've lost access to Sharp Sights and Golden Aegis and Single Combat, which is pretty bad. So yeah, 0 stars for me. I'm sorry. I think the card's garbage. Well, okay, not garbage. Quick Quill. 2 mana, 1/1, quick attack, attach. Not much to talk about with this guy. The card is super, super good. Good synergy with a lot of cards. Challengers in general, like Petricite Broadwing. It's a Fae, so it gets Fae synergy. You can find it off of Fae Sprout too. And giving it more keywords is pretty good as well. For example, giving it Scout with something like Field Promotion is pretty strong. But yeah, and it helps get certain cards out of ping range, like Fleet Feather Tracker. Card is crazy good. I'm gonna give it 4 stars only, though, because, and this is my reason, is while I do think the card is strong, I just don't feel like it really has a home. Like, nowhere does it really feel strong. Like, yes, in Fae decks it feels fine, and giving its Scout with Field Promotion feels strong, but that feels more like a gimmick than an actually viable strategy. Maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe this is 5 stars. Maybe it is cracked, but I could definitely see that. I very much was tempted to give this 5 stars, but I went with 4 stars. Anyway, next card up. Another attached unit. The last attached unit that's not a champion, Rainbow Fish. 4 mana, 2/1, also a Fae. Elusive attached. So basically it gives elusive to a unit. It's strong. Being able to get discounted by Gleaming Lantern helps save it. If it weren't for Gleaming Lantern, I wouldn't like this card. I think 4 mana to give a unit elusive is way too much mana, but Gleaming Lantern saves it. And being able to give, again, like with Quick Quill, being able to give this thing Scout from, oh crap, what's the card? Field Promotion is strong. So, because then you give, well, then you have a scouting elusive attacker, which that's strong. So I'm going to give it 3 stars, though. Kind of needs you to have Gleaming Lantern, and if you don't have Gleaming Lantern on the field, it is a little expensive for the deck it wants to be in, but it's still pretty okay. Next up, though, Scholarly Climber. 4 mana, 5/4 with Spell Shield. This is Yordle. It's multi-region. Targan, Bandle City. Meh. It's nothing crazy here. Like, it's not a bad card. It's fine. It's a stat stick. That is what it is. It is a pile of stats, good stats for its card or its cost, and a solid keyword in the form of Spell Shield. And sometimes that's all you want, really. So I'm going to give it 2 stars. It's fine. Good stats are the cost, and a good keyword are sometimes all you need. And again, with the Yordle tag, it always will have some potential if they release more Yordle synergy, but it is a pretty okay card to attach the attached units to, so it's fine. Next up, Spirit Portal. 4 mana focus speed spell. To play it, discard 1, grant all allies +1/+1. Okay. I'm sorry, I don't really know what this card is trying to do. 4 mana is just too much for this kind of effect. Sure, you can say like, oh, but it lets you enable your discard synergy. Sure, but I don't think there's enough discard synergy for me to want to play bad cards like this. Like, sure, with Flame Chompers, like Boom, like a PNZ Bandel City Boom Baboon deck, discarding Flame Chompers is cute because then you can have a 1/3 Chompers, but I'm still not gonna play Spirit Portal. It's just too expensive. Like that's really it. It's 4 mana. That's too much mana for this effect. 0 stars. If I was going wide and I cared about this effect, I'd rather just play Yordle in Arms, in all honesty. I think Yordle in Arms is just this, but better. Again, really the only reason I would ever play this card is I care about discard synergy, and I feel like there are better ways to discard cards than this. Spotted Toad. 5 mana, 4/5. It's another transform card, so round end it gets to transform into Giga Gromp if you damage the enemy Nexus. Giga Gromp is a 5 mana, 6/7. Impact, when I transform, deal 1 to all enemies. So it's a one-sided Ice Shards. That's pretty strong. Big stats for the cost. Impact's not the greatest, but it's a little icing on the top of the cake. Helps you just get that little bit of chip damage in there so you can actually just keep transforming your cards. It's fine. Like, it's pretty okay in certain decks that just care about damage, like non-combat damage, if that makes sense. So Swain's okay with this as a 1 or a 2. I've seen this even in some burn decks. I don't think it's good in burn decks, but it's okay. Like, this card is a good example of a card that I think is fine and even kind of strong, but a card that you look at and are probably like, it's probably going to be the card I cut from a deck for a stronger card or something. Still, though, it's a good card in the right meta. I'll give it 2 stars. So yeah, I give it 2 stars for that. Now the actual good transform card that's not named Gnar. Teeny Dactyl. 4 mana, 4/3. Yada yada transform stuff, right? Turns into Pterodactyl. 4 mana, 6/5 impact. Round start. Deal 1 to the enemy Nexus. Now here is a good card. 4-drop slots, not that strong for a lot of decks. Usually cards that come down on 4 feel like they're mostly just understated with strong-ish abilities. This card kind of breaks the mold for that. It's got a strong ability, and it's got good stats if you can manage to transform it. Even if you can't transform it, it's still a 4 mana, 4/3, which is terrible for the cost, but it's not the worst. But yeah, good card. Keeps pinging the enemy Nexus each round, so it's got some good synergy with things like Swain. 6/5 for 4 is good stats. Impact is nice too to push in a little damage. I've seen this card in like mid-range decks, control decks, aggro decks. Got a lot of versatility with it. So I like it. I like this card a lot. 3 health for Teeny Dactyl. Well, it's not great and it isn't that hard to deal 3. It's not that easy to deal 3 damage, so it's kind of hard for you to kill it before it transforms. And if it does transform into a Pterodactyl, good luck killing a 6/5 if they never attack in with it. 4 stars for me. Really good card. Good versatility. Missing out on that 1 star because if it doesn't flip, it's really bad. Could just sit in your hand, just not doing anything while you try to get that Nexus damage in to actually transform it, giving your opponent more and more time to actually find ways to deal with it before it transforms. Transposition. I could see myself being wrong with this card. I think this card is bad. I think this card is a meme. 4 mana, fast speed spell. Recall an ally. Next ally you play this round with equal or less cost. Cost 0 instead. So I feel like if it wasn't Vandal City and it was like an Ionia card, I'd like this card. Problem is in Vandal City, I think there are more than enough cards that are good protection spells. So I think if you're playing this card, you're trying to do some weird control shenanigans, right? I've seen some people play it even in darkness with things like Desinata. Using this with Desinata is pretty cute. Using it with Rekindler is cute too. Robe Makers, Ishtali Sentinels, just Darkness Creators is pretty cute. Uh, Still though, is that good? Not in my opinion. I really don't think that is that good in my opinion, but it is cute, I'll say. Maybe, possibly. But I think the best way to play this, like I've seen a lot of cute combos, like playing J4 and then playing transposition on something like J3, and then in theory, all of your J4s in hand are 0 mana. So since they're all 0 mana, all of them will get summoned when you attack. That's cute. Um, Cards that discount themselves, like Plaza Guardian, the 10 mana 6/6 with quick attack that gets its cost reduced by 1 for each spell casted, uh, is technically still 10 mana for the case of transposition. So I've seen people play like Plaza Guardian, transposition the Plaza Guardian, and then play things like 0 mana Karinas and then replay the Plaza Guardian as well. That's cute. But again, I feel like that's just too much of a meme. That's slow. And as for like non-meme decks that are trying to use this as a protection spell, I feel like there are better protection spells out there like Stress Defense and Friendship. Gonna give it a 1 star though, because I can see some potential in the future with some kind of cute, funny OTK deck that just will not be able to be stopped. Or at least will be using transposition and maybe protection spells or counter magic to try and keep its combo safe. So I could see that being a thing. Definitely feels like a card that's just waiting to get broken, in other words. Next up, though, Wallop. We already talked about this a little bit with Gnar. 3 mana fast speed spell, deal 1 to an enemy, stun it. I mean, it's a fast speed stun. It's fine. It's a little expensive, though, and doesn't really fit Bandel City's play style at the moment. Maybe in the future with like Yasuo buffs, maybe Yasuo Bandel City will really become a thing, but as it stands now, it's not that great for Bandle City. Pretty okay though in certain decks though. If they're playing Bandle City, it is decent for combo decks that are just trying to stall. Decks that are trying to play like, I don't know, not even combo, but just trying to stall until the late game. It's just okay for them. The biggest strength of it is it's 3 mana, so Conchologist can find this, and that is crazy good. Still though, so like I think it's fine as a 1 or a 2 of in certain decks. In other words, I think if you're playing this in your constructed deck, it is definitely not critiquable if you're playing this in your constructed deck. It's gonna get 3 whole stars from me. It has like 1 or 2 decks where it shines, but for the most part, I don't think it's that good in Bandle City. But for combo decks that are just trying to stall until they can actually combo off, it's okay. Next up, though, what do we have? Yordle Portal. 3 mana burst speed spell. To play it, discard 1, manifest a Yordle. That costs 3 or less, and summon it. I like this card. I think I'm weird for this, but I just like this card. I like cards that give you. I like ways that give you burst speed blockers / attackers, burst speed units. Yordle Portal does that. It also has some synergy with things like Shellfolk, and I like my Shellfolk. So I like this card as like a 1 of. I also like it in Lux Shellfolk. I don't think Lux Shellfolk's that good anymore. I think it's kind of been power crept out, and the meta is just a little too fast for Lux Shellfolk, but pretty nice for that deck too. But yeah, definitely it feels like this card is meant for decks that are trying to be slower and are being used for, and it's meant to be used for burst speed blockers to try and protect you. Because it's okay in the early game to try to get a burst speed blocker to protect you and maybe get some extra value from a strong summon ability. And in the late game, you use it with like a Shellfolk or something to get even more value. However, meta's too slow. Or sorry, meta's too fast. I wish the meta was slow. But yeah, meta's too fast. Having to discard isn't necessarily a negative, but if there was more discard synergy for more slower, grindier control decks, I'd like it even more, but sadly there aren't. I don't know, Boom Baboon giving you a Flame Chomper and using Yordle Portal to discard it, it'd be cute, but I think you could do better than that. I'm going to give it 1 star though. I think there's some potential here, but at the moment it's just, it doesn't really have a home is the biggest problem with this card. And our last card and our last champion for the entire set, we have Yuumi. A lot to talk about here with Yuumi. 3-mana 2/2 with attach. Round start, grant the unit I'm attached to +1/+1. Otherwise, grant me +1/+1 instead. That's big. To level up Yuumi, she or the unit she's attached to has to have attacked 3 times. And then when Yuumi levels up, she now has Spell Shield, still gives a +1/+1, but also she will grant who she's attached to or herself Spell Shield at the start of the round. So she'll be giving a Spell Shield each and every single round. So you ping a Spell Shield, she'll refresh it. So you'll have to ping the Spell Shield and kill whoever Yuumi's attached to in the same turn, which is a little taxing on mana, on your mana. And then her champion spell is Prowling Projectile. And that's the problem with Yuumi. If it weren't for her champion spell, I think she would be a lot better. The fact that Prowling Projectile is not a good card is what's holding back Yuumi. That and I don't know. It's like Yuumi decks kind of are slow. Like the decks that play Yuumi outside of maybe Pantheon are all trying to use Yuumi as a value creator, while Pantheon Yuumi decks are just like, okay, yeah, Yuumi's pretty much just here to activate FaeAid and give me more and more stats on my like Wounded White Flame or something. Which that's fine for those decks. But things like Yuumi Zoe, those decks are just trying to use Yuumi as a value creator, and that's way too slow in the current meta. If the meta were to slow down, sure, Yuumi would be much, much better. But as it stands now, she is a fine card. She has her decks. She does some good stuff. If her champion spell was better, I would like her much, much more. But because of the way she is now and her bad champion spell, I actually like only playing 2 of her in a lot of decks I play. Like 3 of one champ, 2 Yuumis, and then 1 of another random champ that's just good on its own, like a Vi or an Ezreal or something. Because it's kind of hard to actually, you know, do anything if you've drawn a second Yuumi. That second Yuumi is pretty much just Prowling Projectile, and that sucks. Still though, with that all said, I'm going to give her 4 stars. I think she's pretty good. The continuous stat boost is annoying for people. Sure, getting obliterated with like a fallen comet is annoying because you're getting 2 for 1, but that's just what the problem is with attached. That's the risk you're taking with all attached cards. Anyway, though, that is all the cards. That is every single card from A Curious Journey. I hope you enjoyed it. But yeah, I am my throat is killing me now. I haven't done a video this long in a while. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'd love to hear your opinion on the cards as well. Anything you agree with, disagree with. I'd love to hear your opinions on them and why you think that way. So if you have anything you'd like to tell me about my ratings, maybe you think, like, for example, Udir is not as bad as I said. Maybe I'm being a little too hard on Udir, or maybe you agree with me and you think, or maybe you think Udir's even worse than I gave him credit for. Maybe you think he's actually garbage and you think I'm being too generous with giving him 2 stars. I'd love to hear your opinions down below. And if you just enjoyed the video in general, I would love it if you could leave a like or a comment down below. Always helps me out, always helps out the channel as well. And if you guys want to keep up with this kind of content, this kind of Legends of Runeterra content, you can always go and subscribe to the channel as well. Anyway, though, if you also want to watch me play some Legends of Runeterra, you can go and check me out over on Twitch at twitch.tv/Zenaton, where I stream pretty much every single day. Anyway, with that all said and done, thank you all again once more for watching this video. And until I see you guys in the next one, bye.